Hi, I'm Meta Spencer. Um, this is a Zoom day, a schmooze day, and I have two friends with me so far. And a schmooze day means we don't know what we're going to talk about, but we've got it set up today, so I kind of have a pretty good idea what's going to happen because my friends are both people who know each other quite well and who are engaged with the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War Canada. That is the Canadian branch of this very prestigious and marvelous organization of physicians and health workers who have really done a huge amount to bring peace to the world. So congratulations, you two good people. In Sudbury, I expect, is Richard Denton, Dr. Richard Denton, who's got a backdrop about peace. A minute ago, you had your backdrop on about Rotarians, so you seem to switch identities, like taking hats off. Good morning, Richard. How are you?
Very well, Amanda.
Oh, I see. You got Rotary on too, just a little smaller logo. Okay, and Dr. Barbara Burkett is not too far from here. Oakville. Dr. Burkett is a retired dermatologist, and both people are very engaged with the International Physicians. We call it IPPNW, and you can too.
Really like some good ideas about how to advocate for a ceasefire in the Ukraine.
Very good.
I think what we need to do then is to, again, probably work behind the scenes as we did during the Cuban Missile Crisis. At that time, it was the Secretary General Hugh Thant and others who worked behind the scenes, negotiated an agreement between Khrushchev and Kennedy. Khrushchev would pull his missiles out of Cuba, which is what we all heard about. But Kennedy pulled his missiles out of Turkey, which we didn't know about at that time. And that was why Khrushchev was putting his missiles in Cuba, because Kennedy had put missiles in Turkey. So sort of, a tit for tat. And now, I think that, again, things are always complex, but the negotiation needs to occur, and it certainly is going to occur at some stage. And I think both Barbara and I and IPPNW, of course, want to see it much sooner to end the killing of innocent people, as well as soldiers on both sides. Certainly, there are other countries right now, Macron in France, the Israel Prime Minister, Erdogan in Turkey, are all working, trying to create peace. I think there's individual people, Russians, etc., who are also trying to work for peace. Here in Canada, a Rotarian out in British Columbia, Ernest Thiessen, who you know about, has worked on a computer program that all the various sides, multiple sides, can put their input in, and it will work out a compromise that is better than the status quo.
Richard, let me ask you about that, because I did have a talk show with him where
Correct.
He showed an example of how to use his method, which does involve using the computer. But the example he gave was actually drawn from India and Pakistan, the Kashmir dispute. And I know that he was talking about doing something that would be similar regarding the Ukraine conflict, but I haven't, and I actually was trying to find some Russians and Ukrainians who might participate in it, but they were so engaged with the actual dynamics of the current affairs that they thought the idea of playing a game was just ridiculous, playing a game with it, which is what really, they shouldn't use that word game because it trivializes the notion of modeling the various options. But did he actually develop a simulation that applies to the Ukraine war, or is that still in the works?
No, he has applied that. Again, as you say, it's the old adage in years ago when computers first started, garbage in, garbage out. But so what he needs is experts, both from Russia and Ukraine, to put their emphasis on what they would consider a negotiated settlement. So he has this all set up, but we do need people, as you say, from both sides to put their input into it. Now, the beauty is that both sides can do this independently and, quote, secretively from each other, so they don't have to come to blows in the same room. So that's another advantage of this system.
So he's actually still hunting for
Yes,
so-called
much so.
players. The war is not, it does present logistical problems, but it's interesting that he's got this far, and it's certainly a worthwhile thing to do. I think it might come up with some promising outcome. Nothing is going to be promising, frankly. I was reading something that had some military people and others, and they were saying, really, we have to recognize that Russia is really going to win this. Russia is going to claim the Donbass. They've already got a land bridge from Crimea up to Kherson, I think, and they have control of Kherson. They're taking, as we speak, Severodonetsk, the word I can never pronounce, but that city, Severodonetsk. And people were worried about it's going to be a long, protracted war. I think it's more likely it won't, that there will be a time soon when people, including Europe, because Europe is not going to hold together with the kind of solidarity that they've shown initially. And I think that Europe and others will have to press Ukraine to say, okay, we will accept the terms, that whatever we have to accept. And I hate to say it, but I think Putin's going to do it again. He's going to go someplace and attack whatever he can get, just keep going until he puts together Peter the Great's empire or something, He's already talking like he thinks he's Peter the Great. So I don't want war, for absolutely I sure don't. But on the other hand, there's no good outcome to this thing. We're all going to be worse off because of it. Barbara, make me shut up or cheer me up or something.
Well, I noticed that Zelensky's asking for more long-range weapons today from Canada. Should we tell the government no? Enough is enough. That's the other thing. And I was more encouraged listening to Doug Roach the other day, who sees hope for common security through the UN, and and one means working through the General Assembly when the big powers try to use the veto. That seems to be, one hopeful sign.
Okay, elaborate. I know that maybe 6 weeks or 2 months ago or something, there was an attempt to kind of use the Uniting for Peace method, I don't know what to call it, approach or precedent
Mhm.
There's talk about trying to expand on that. Do you know exactly what he thinks would work?
Well, one of the things that's happening at the Security Council is Mexico and Ireland are looking to put forward a motion for a ceasefire and mentioning Russia by name. By mentioning Russia by name, then Russia can't veto it because of conflict of interest. But China could veto it on Russia's behalf. So, but I think that getting a ceasefire is sort of the first step or one step moving forward. Once you have a ceasefire, then it's possible, but again, it's a long shot for the UN to send in its peacekeepers, the blue helmets, the green helmets, to put a buffer between the Ukrainians and the Russians. So that would be another step. And then, of course, as I was saying earlier, working on a negotiated peace settlement. But right now, it's in creating a settlement, you need to have trust. And certainly that is totally lacking between the two groups. Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons on the grounds that Russia would never attack it. And now, of course, Russia has attacked. So there's just no trust there. And as I said earlier, that their slogan is never forget, never forgive. And so again, that's not going to create a peaceful settlement. But I think that peace is still possible, and I think that that's what we need to work on, and we need to continue that dialogue. I think that closing down embassies is not the answer. We need that red telephone between the heads of state, and so that people can talk to each other.
Tell me about your conversation. You say you were in touch with some physicians in Ukraine?
Just now, I was listening to a physician in Ukraine that's in a hospital that is treating the burn victims primarily, but people also from shrapnel and other orthopedic injuries, both civilian and military.
And you say he was talking about never forgiving. Well,
that's a slogan of Ukrainians generally right now, not him specifically.
Maybe we should advocate for never forget, but move forward.
Correct.
First, let's go back to what you said about Doug Roach, because I didn't hear his talk, and I'm not sure what he would be referring to with any hope. There was some progress about 6 weeks ago when Liechtenstein, I believe it's Liechtenstein, introduced a motion, but that does not cancel the veto. So how does he think that's, what kind of strategy could he invoke to cancel the right, Russia's right, or even China's right to veto any motion?
I don't think it cancels it, but I think the General Assembly can advocate instead on many things with huge numbers of countries involved. So I think that seems to be, a way around, hopefully a way around the veto, and encouraging the humanitarian groups and so on, and the UN and UNHCR and so on, and the skills that the UN has available.
what plan have you heard of to convene the General Assembly? You'd have to call a special emergency meeting of the General Assembly, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I haven't, yeah, I haven't heard definitely this was, I think, you know, an option he suggested was available.
I did not see any particular reason for hope, but you know, Doug Roach knows more than I do.
Opting for common security is, you know, not.
Well, whoop-de-doo. I'm sorry for sounding so cynical, but this is the worst moment to try to accomplish that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there is just no, I mean, even 6 months ago, it was a bad time to try to talk anybody into thinking along the lines of common security. But when you are in the middle of a war, sorry, but I don't see that happening.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Meta, that it is extremely difficult, but yet on the flip side, it is more imperative than ever because of the war that we come out with a negotiated peace settlement. And again, both Barbara and I, our concern is the escalation of this war to small tactical nuclear weapons, and then to major strategic weapons, and then the destruction of civilization as we know it.
Mm-hmm.
And what seems to be happening now is Putin initially was sort of slow to start in this war, in that he hoped that he would be greeted with open arms. When that didn't happen, he's now going in and doing the scorched earth destruction. But if he ever thinks that he might be losing or whatever, it just takes 15 missiles to hit those 15 nuclear reactors, which then would release more radiation than Chernobyl did. And you would have 15 Chernobyls in Ukraine, which would make Ukraine totally uninhabitable.
It would make the world uninhabitable.
That too.
Yeah, I mean, it just wouldn't, you know, you can't even, that's just almost inconceivable. But using a small tactical nuclear weapon on a battlefield once, just to show that he's willing to do it, that's more likely. I think I can't imagine anybody crazy enough to actually do something that's going to be as big as what you've described. But using it as I'll show you kind of, here, you see this, I got more, that he could do, and I wouldn't be surprised. In one of the global town halls, Andrei Kamenshikov was speaking to us from Kyiv, and he is, of course, a peace worker. Professionally, he coordinates a peace network in Eastern Europe, including Ukraine. But he lives in Kyiv. But he was saying, please, can you tell me how to get the word to either Modi or Xi? Because those are the only two people who could yank on Putin's leash and tell him, no, you absolutely can't use a single nuclear weapon, and under any circumstances. So, of course, we don't know how to get to Xi or Modi, but it was only under those circumstances that he thinks that would happen. That is, if Putin is really losing and he's got his back to the wall and there's nothing else for him to do, then he would do it. But probably, and it would still be merely a small tactical nuclear weapon, one of these trivial little things you don't have to worry about. But, other people have said, no, he might do it if he's feeling real good about being able to get away with it. I don't know. Either way, it's a scary proposition. That's not the business of him losing is no longer imminent or probable. I think what I see happening now is he's going to win. He's got his land bridge. He's going to control the ports and he may take Odessa. He may go over to Moldova along the south part. So, probably there'll be some part of Ukraine still extant after he takes his piece, but he's going to capture quite a bit, and they're going to have to give him the Donbass. So that is what I think is most likely, and I don't want to be that pessimistic. The optimists on this scenario say, well, he still can't control Ukraine. He couldn't occupy Ukraine because you'd need 50 million, well, I don't know how many million soldiers to do it, and you can't occupy a country that size. So they say the most hopeful way of retaining some agency on the part of Ukraine would be to here comes Neil Arya, good for him, will be to encourage nonviolent civil resistance after the ceasefire, so that if in the places that Russia is occupying, there would be Ukrainians resisting with nonviolent civil resistance, and proving what the Danes did in World War II, that you can slow down people and you can't make the occupiers, you can keep them from succeeding. Anyway, hello, Neil Arya. Welcome.
Hi, pleased to meet you. Sorry I had to join late. I had a meeting for our refugee health clinic.
Oh yeah, well, tell me about that. You of course know everybody. This is Dr. Neil Arya, audience, who is where you are in Waterloo or Kitchener.
Yeah, Kitchener Waterloo.
Yeah, and he's also a physician, and he's taken care of a lot of refugees. We're talking about Ukraine. Guess what? And I'm doing too much of the talking, so I'm going to be quiet and let you give your thoughts. Neil, what's the story? What are you interested in and concerned about today?
Well, since you asked about refugees, and I think we did talk a bit the last time I was on a call with you, Meta, about the Ukrainian refugees. We don't see them in our clinic because we only see government-assisted refugees. And there are going to be others who are looking after that. We had offered to help if we had the funding, which hasn't been forthcoming. But I think the needs of we have governments which make commitments to certain populations, and then we are left scrambling as to how to deal with those commitments. And that happened when we accepted a lot of Syrian refugees back in 2016, with the Afghans too, and now with the Ukrainians. And it isn't always done on a needs basis, and so some people get not looked after. So I look at things more at our local level than thinking about the international geopolitics. But yeah, interested in Barbara and Richard's feelings about the international situation.
Don't go away, because I want you to tell us how many you got. Syrians and Afghans. Even that's progress, because I had the idea that Canada's still not admitting the kind of numbers of Afghans that they should or had promised. But you don't have many Ukrainians there yet, or you just aren't dealing with them?
Yeah, so it's probably a combination of both. With the Syrians, the government in 2015-16 was elected promising to help the Syrians. And at that time in KW, we had 3 times our annual numbers of refugees just with Syrians in the space of 3 months. So it was like 9 times our monthly total each month that we had to look after. So it was initially they housed them at military bases and then brought them to us, and we had to develop a local response. So that was something that the government as it was planning to do things, they could have consulted more widely our federal government, and then we could have developed something that would have been much better. But the Afghans, we haven't had as many, particularly the privately sponsored ones, as the government committed to. It's certainly, even though they've been arriving since August, and so it's almost a year, we're far short of the numbers to which the government has committed, and we do have people who are in very precarious situations, some within Afghanistan and some just outside, who there's some really tragic stories of people reaching out to individuals for assistance. There are apparently some lost files of people, or so it is a little bit of a mess, more so than one would expect, despite Canada's chaotic exit. And the Ukrainians largely are not government-assisted refugees. The Afghans also were not considered refugees because they were not outside of their borders largely by the time that we were taking them. So so from each of these different groups, it's been a little bit, they're different. But the Ukrainians, we were going to help manage with our clinic with the earlier needs, but we have not been asked to do that thus far.
Mm-hmm. How many Ukrainians are there so far?
So I do have friends here who have offered to help from the Ukrainian community. I know some friends in Guelph who've also been part of community responses, people who've taken things. So I know that we've got many, but I don't know how many. And
there are many Ukrainian refugees have come. We don't hear about them. I haven't seen any stories about any of them, I gather. But, you know, there are so many Canadian Ukrainians who've been here, you know, generations, that I would think they would be very welcoming and very helpful.
They are. And in Western Canada, there are even more groups, but even in KW and in Guelph, I know that through the Ukrainian, both Orthodox as well as Catholic churches, that people have mobilized around that. And there are doctors doing things on an individual basis. But our refugee health clinics around the country, by and large, are not dealing with them.
And the same here in Sudbury and in my Rotary district. Parry Sound, I think, has taken about 13 different families. Other families are coming in. It's a trickle, I would say, but they're coming into Sudbury and up to New Liskeard and up to Kapuskasing, etc. The problem is that many of the Ukrainians that are here who run the institutions, as you say, Neil, the Ukrainian Orthodox and the Ukrainian Catholic Church are senior citizens now, and so are not as able to be involved as they would like to. So I know here in Sudbury, I was talking with our Ukrainian people, and while we have both Catholic and Ukrainian Orthodox churches, we have senior citizens apartments, we have a federation of Ukrainians, we have 3 Ukrainian summer camps. But so it looks great on paper, but in actuality, you've got maybe 12 families that show up to church on Sunday. You've got maybe 5 families that actually speak Ukrainian. So the ability on the ground is much less versatile than what in the paper would suggest. Having said that, though, I think that various organizations such as Rotary are rallying to the cause. We have a church, an affirming United Church, that is becoming involved. And so these groups are certainly helping out. And again, here in Sudbury, we have the city has its own immigration people at City Hall who are working. We've got people who can help with English as a second language. There's technology now that people can speak, and it can be instantly translated by the computer into English. So
Decent translation.
yes,
I mean,
but by verbally as well as written. So these are all extremely helpful. And again, when you talk about placement, the colleges now have their dormitories for vacant for the summer, and so the federal government is putting people in there on a temporary basis. The federal government can give out, I think, $500 a week to adults to help them get established. They are starting to bring over Ukrainians by the plane load. And so all of this is happening, but it is just sort of
Well, I have
very
heard-
early stages.
Yeah, I have heard that of course, there's 6 million or so, I think, already in East, Poland, Hungary, and I don't know, several countries. But I've heard that most people want to go home when they can, and so they'd rather be in Poland or someplace because it's easy for them to get back home when the opportunity arises. But that the people who come to Canada are those who are willing to actually think in terms of staying and becoming Canadian. But also there's a thing about how it's mostly old people and women and children. Mostly, in fact, just women and children, I think. I don't even know whether they're letting old men out. But you seem to say that what the people coming to Sudbury are families. Is that right? The whole families?
Well, when I say family, you're correct, Meta. That is often the mother and children.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the men. Often, again, the husbands are staying behind and fighting.
Mm-hmm. Has IPPNW taken a concerted position about what you want to see happen in this war now? I mean, everybody's, frothing at the mouth. I've been ad-libbing constantly about my point of view, but I'm not sure how much consistency or agreement there is within IPPNW, and whether there is an official policy.
I think there have been fairly strong statements both by the international IPPNW and the Canadian chapter.
Meta, at the beginning, there were some statements that you can find on the IPPNW webpage, and specifically those were related to nuclear risks, that with Chernobyl having changed sides and another reactor in the south also, that was considered of danger. So I think IPPNW did focus much more on the dangers of the nuclear power plant and then the use of nuclear weapons by different sides that were threatening. So there it was quite consistent, but in terms of the other parts related to the war itself and conduct of the war, not as much specifically, I think, internationally.
Mm-hmm. Well, there certainly seems to be, if you look at the whole peace movement, the range of opinions is extremely wide, don't you think? I mean, I get emails every day, listservs that I'm on and things, people expressing a whole variety of points of view, including a very significant number of people who I think are more pro-Putin than they would be pro-Zelensky.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know whether that's your impression too. but a very large number of people have, at least until recently, taken the view that which is a very real point, that, NATO was really encroaching on Russia and they have a legitimate grievance, which I agree. Doesn't explain what they did, but it certainly, they have a point that it was a mistake, in my opinion. Do you think it was a mistake? Is there anybody in IPPNW who would, yes, I know there must be, but who would say, yeah, NATO is right. These countries, Eastern European countries that used to be part of the Soviet Union, have every right to join NATO and should be welcomed in. Is there much of that point of view being expressed among the people you know?
I think most people have for months and months now been concerned about the eastward extension of NATO and the threat that it was upsetting Russia. So
that's a general point of view, right?
I think, well, I can ask the others if they agree, but I think.
I was just at Rotary International, and at the opening ceremonies, we parade all the flags from all the countries that we are involved in. And actually, Rotary is involved in more countries than are members of the United Nations. And when the Russian flag came out, you could hear a pin drop. When the Ukrainian flag came out, it was a standing ovation. And that was 11,000 Rotarians. Now, Rotary is nonpartisan. We have clubs in Russia, about 70 odd clubs in Russia. And so we definitely want to support them as well. But I would say that within Rotary, certainly the support is on the Ukrainian side.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I think that I see some old lefties, I hear them on my inbox, but they will say that the Russians were justified in doing in this attack because they were so threatened. I think it was a bad mistake on NATO's part, but it doesn't justify anything because the violations are outrageous. And also, I think I'm equally appalled at the fact that when the International Court of Justice issued its order to Russia to stop, because they had to have time to actually do an analysis of the legality of the Russians' demands. Of course, the Russians just shrugged it off and wouldn't react at all. Didn't pay any attention to that. So, I mean, when Doug Roach and Barbara are hopeful about a common security approach, and you can't even get the slightest acknowledgement of the authority of the International Court of Justice, I'm not too hopeful about promoting common security in any big time way.
You're correct about some people of the old left saying that anything that the West wasn't doing, that basically that Russia would be justified. I don't think that represents the majority of people or younger people within the Canadian populace, as Richard is saying. As with Rotary, there's a great deal of sympathy for the Ukrainian plight, and we don't consider, despite I think very legitimate arguments on the Russian side, not just with regard to NATO expansion and possible promises in the early 1990s, the violations of accords and human rights in Donbass and the ethnic Russians perhaps suffering, or the agreement in 2014, and the fact that there are rightist forces there who might be considered neo-Nazis. So like all of those things, I think that have to be acknowledged, but the violation of Ukrainian sovereignty, which was also guaranteed when Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons, that there are many other things which make this illegitimate. But I think in terms of considering common security, we have to look at some of the other areas of hypocrisy, like with regard to nations' borders not being inviolable. We saw in Kosovo, for instance, that most of us in the West felt that Kosovo should deserve to be broken off from Serbia, or what they still called Yugoslavia. We didn't oppose the U.S. interventions in Iraq and Afghanistan, and so I think that in terms of really developing that common security based on common principles, we have to fulfill that at our end at the same time as we require that of others. And it's funny, like the U.S. not signing on to the International Criminal Court, and yet wanting to see some sort of internationally recognized court as prosecuting the Russian. We condemn the Russians for parading Ukrainian prisoners of war, or having these war crimes trials, but while at the same time really not following those norms ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with those points that, I think although people have been concerned about NATO's expansion, people are still overwhelmingly opposed to what Russia has done, both the initial invasion and, its recent use of cluster bombs, and, the dangers of their weapons hitting the nuclear power plants and so on. So I think people have been horrified by the pictures of the destruction of Mariupol and places, that's, and the sympathy at the moment is largely with the Ukrainian people.
Well, I think in addition that the recent statement by Putin has in a way clarified matters, in that, you could argue, people have argued about whether or not he would have done it anyway, even if, he claims that it's because NATO was encroaching. Well, NATO shouldn't have encroached, but that wasn't a good enough reason. Was that really his motive, trying to stop NATO? No, he'd been doing things elsewhere already anyway. But now he's made it very clear that his motive is really to try to reassemble the Russian Empire. And he thinks he's Peter the Great. And he said so the other day. He's trying to do what Peter the Great did, same thing, and try to recover lands that Russia should have had all along. So I think it's really disposed of any argument to the effect that his motivation was really just to stop NATO, because and the worst of the implication is that if they have a ceasefire and he wins, he'll keep going. And I think that's not unreasonable to expect that might happen. So I'm not very happy about the idea of, well, I'll be very worried when there's a ceasefire that actually concedes territory to Russia as a means of getting an end to this fighting.
I would tend to agree. And as I said earlier, I think trust is lacking on both sides. And so it's going to be difficult to negotiate a peace settlement.
Lacking on one side, I could see. What's lacking on the part of the Russians? The Ukrainians have been very frank about saying what they would do, what they want to do, and so on. So I believe the Russians should take their word for the fact they're being honest. Barbara, you think not? or not?
No, I was just going to ask you, with your long knowledge of Russia and people in Russia, do you have any inkling on how long Putin is likely to survive and how much support he has in the country?
Well, yeah, I've got a lot of inkling that about 80% of the population now support him. And I don't know how fervently, but at least publicly, that's what they will say they support. So it's a very sad situation if you think, as I do, that the only people who can stop him are Russians, and the Russians are behind him. So it's very disappointing. I'm sorry to be so cranky today, but I really worry about that. As far as his health goes, I mean, that's all just rumor. Nobody knows you're talking about. Is he going to die soon? I don't think so. Do you?
I don't
Maybe
know.
if he'd stick his tongue out and say, you could tell us a little bit about how long he's going to live, but I can't tell you.
No, you need a hands-on to make a diagnosis, I think.
Palpate Putin. Give him an extra little squeeze. Okay.
Well, I would still advocate for a negotiated peace settlement through any agency, favoring, well, I wouldn't say favoring, but, be it through the United Nations or the work that the Israeli Prime Minister Bennett is doing, or Marshall in France, or Erdogan, or work of Iceland and Mexico recently, or hopefully will do in the Security Council. All of these, I think, are what we should be pushing for.
Iceland and Mexico. Tell me about that. I don't.
Or sorry, Ireland. Ireland and
Oh.
Mexico. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Do you know any more about that? What? Maybe Neil can explain a little bit. What are they trying to do?
I don't know about Ireland and Mexico in particular.
They're proposing to have a ceasefire motion at the Security Council, mentioning Russia by name so that Russia can't veto it. But then China could still veto on Russia's behalf.
Well, suppose they got it through. All right. Suppose, in fact, nobody vetoed it and they passed a thing saying, Russia, stop it. What would happen? What do you think the odds are that Russia would stop? They didn't pay any attention to the ICJ. They didn't pay any attention earlier when the General Assembly took a vote. And then what are you going to do? You don't have a peacekeeping force. You can't, what are you going to do?
When you do create rules, those who have the power to flout them, if it's in their interests, they tend to do that anyway. It's not that, and that has been with China, the US, with Britain and France too, even though Western Europeans like to think of themselves as being order-based. Israel, any country that versus those around sees that their interests are strong enough, they aren't going to be stopped from these types of military ventures just by a resolution of the even the Security Council, which is our only way of really enacting or empowering us to use international law.
Has any country ever violated or disregarded an order by Security Council? I've never thought about it.
Israel-Palestine resolutions 242, 338, all of that, which have been violated for many years. And then we look at like for IPPNW
Yeah,
in
but
terms
the
of,
US always vetoes it. That's the difference.
no, those were passed. Those
Oh.
were passed years ago.
Okay.
But then we also look at other groups in terms of NATO and its own thing in terms of Article 5 and Article 6. It even in terms of things that we've signed onto, that countries will ignore those things. Even saying that you're going to get nuclear powers to disarm in return for others not developing things. The nuclear powers have been saying that nuclear weapons are a cornerstone of their policy. Now we see, after decreasing the number of nuclear weapons in the world of most powers, now we see the declared powers actually modernizing and perhaps even increasing. So, I think it's not just Security Council resolutions which are ignored, and then we could look at the limitations, say, like even the resolutions on Libya, for instance, that went through, that we went beyond what the resolutions had stated too. So yeah, no, I think in terms of violations, then it's when a country does violate something that is passed or goes beyond what its mandate, then what mechanism is there to stop a country from doing that, or a group of countries?
We're going to have common security. We're going to have to, I mean, there's so much need for, people are talking about a new world order, a whole new set of rules, because the current ones have been violated so much, and we have to strengthen the UN, and it's going to need some sort of security, emergency peace service of some kind, which would be their own maybe 15,000 person unit that could go quickly to a place to intervene when at the drop of a hat, because they can't seem to move very quickly with the current arrangements. And but getting past this veto thing is the biggest part of the hurdle, I think. Making it clear that countries, if you want to belong to NATO, you have to obey with the rules. I don't know.
Can you make the argument to whoever's initiating the conflict that they would be better off if they produced, they'd have better results if they just stayed away from bombs and terror? That's, and even try to do that with Putin now, say, look, you've shown you're pretty strong. If you do any more shelling, there's not going to be any country for you to deal with in the end. So why don't you just stop now?
We'll send you, Barbara. You're as persuasive as anybody I know. That's the end of Barbara. Okay, guys, this has been, I don't know, this is discouraging. I'm not the least bit happier than I was, or reassured you haven't helped me a bit today. I'm in a bad mood.
Well, I'll just think about another message of hope. So in terms of other things that we were thinking about, we just finished courses on peace through health and environmental health with Pegasus and McGill. And those are very successful with people from all over the world, more than half of participants in the Global South with our Peace Through Health course. And in that, also at the time that we were having the course, the World Health Assembly passed a resolution basically saying that its priority for the next year was health to peace and peace to health. And so I think those connections are becoming much stronger. And also the UN Secretary General has made comments along those lines. So I think that link between peace and health and having international bodies working towards that is is getting more prominent. There's a group that's being launched at the beginning of July, the Global Alliance on War and Health, with people again from around the world. A guy named Samer Jabour from American University in Beirut is helping leading that, and it's being led. The secretariat's going to be at the University of Southampton. So different things in terms of people thinking about ways of dealing with war from a health perspective. So that gives me some.
Okay, so thank you. I needed a little.
And I've just add from Rotary point of view is we've come out with a socially responsible investing policy that we will not invest in weapons of mass destruction and nuclear explosives. ICAN works with the Don't Bank on the Bomb. This past year, they took over $60 billion worth of investment that is not available now to the 25 companies that make nuclear weapons and their components. And so the money that's available to those 25 companies is decreasing every year. They still get about $670 billion of investments per year, but that amount is decreasing. So that is optimistic. So I think, and right now, of course, next week will be the first meeting of the state parties looking at the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons.
Good. Well, I'm glad you mentioned the TPNW meeting. There's basis for maybe some optimism there. So appreciate this. And
Okay.
Here, Project Save the World produces one of these shows 3 days a week and sometimes more. This is episode number 464. You can watch them or listen to them as audio podcasts on our website, tosavetheworld.ca. Eventually, we even post the transcripts there. And when you get there, look around. We have conversations going on there all the time about 6 global issues, plus potential reforms in governance, economics, and civil society. To find a particular talk show, just enter its title or episode number in the search bar, or the name of one of the guest speakers. After you've watched or listened, scroll down and share your own thoughts about the show. This is a place for dialogue, so please join in. Project Save the World also produces a quarterly online publication, Peace Magazine. You can buy a single copy or subscribe for $20 Canadian per year through PressReader. Just go to pressreader.com on your browser, and in the search bar, enter the word peace. You'll see the cover of the current issue and buttons to click to subscribe.